A very good evening, everyone, and a warm welcome to our Belanjawan 2021 talk show, our analysis of the budget for 2021. And we thank you all for joining us this evening. I'm Terence Das. The significance which is in unity is an eternal wonder. Rabindranath Tagore thought I'd start with that because, of course, we are looking for that eternal wonder in bringing everyone together and uniting them behind this budget. The theme, Stand United, We Shall Prevail, has been chosen to identify that we need to actually come together as a nation, and hopefully when Parliament resumes, everyone in Parliament will actually pass the budget. Much needed relief for the people and a lot of significance for the nation in rebuilding the economy. We have my two guests in the studio to help us pick apart the various points in the budget. We have Encik Imran Yassin Mat Yusof, head of MIDF Research, and Patrick Tay, Deals Partner, Economics and Policy with PwC Malaysia. Thank you very much for joining us, gentlemen.
Thanks, Tim.
Thank you.
So let's start with some quick observations on the budget. It's a huge budget, 322.5 billion ringgit. It is the largest budget ever, and it's not just large in terms of the size, but also in terms of the speech itself. I think about 108 pages, 200 odd paragraphs, delivered over, of course, the course of using a tablet by the Minister of Finance, who's, of course, all behind the sustainability factor of the SDG goals. So there you go, a budget that was tabled for the very first time by the Minister of Finance. But the size of the budget begs the question, how do we finance this budget given the challenging times today? Is it going to be more borrowing? We have any windfall tax in the budget somewhere? Patrick?
Yeah, thanks, Terence. You're absolutely right. The budget was a huge budget. You know, our minister was a very fit guy. You know, I was almost out of breath when he was delivering his speech. But to the point that you asked, how will the budget be financed? I think the budget will result in a deficit. Mm-hmm. So the deficit part will be financed by debt. Mm-hmm. Right? But in terms of the projections for 2021, the government's expecting a bounce back in the economy, and a bounce back in the economy is going to generate quite a bit of tax revenues for the government. Now, some people have labeled that optimistic, mm-hmm. But it is a point of view, and it is a point of view by the budget team at the Ministry of Finance, right? So most of the financing is going to come through increased tax revenues. Whatever's left over as a deficit will be funded through debt.
Do you think there are any misses, though, on perhaps a windfall tax for the glove-making industry, which has seen a lot of profits because of the pandemic, and, of course, production has been ramped up? It wouldn't be the first time we've had windfall taxes on any specific industry. Do you think we missed out on that, Imran?
Well, if you look at the budget, the glove company is giving some contribution back. They're giving some money back. So I think I wouldn't call it a windfall tax, but I guess in lieu of the windfall tax, that's how the glove companies are contributing in terms of the windfall that they're getting from the for the sector.
Right.
Yeah.
And that sector is huge. We are, of course, the epicenter of the glove-making industry worldwide. So prioritizing the Rakyat's well-being, let's move on to healthcare. There's a 17 billion carve-out for the COVID-19 fund, and 3 billion being allocated for the vaccine purchases under COVAX. So do you reckon this is both fused together into the 17 billion? Is it separate? Can you help us kind of break that down, Patrick?
Yeah, thanks, Terence. I looked at the numbers, and the minister has also come out to clarify it after several people jumped the gun and got all excited over a bunch of new lines in the detail of the budget estimates. The minister has helpfully clarified that actually the overall budget has been increased by 4.2%.
For the healthcare?
For the healthcare, for the Ministry of Health.
For the Ministry of Health.
For the Ministry of Health. In addition to that, there's also the allocations under the COVID budget. So I think now you could always argue whether, you know, a 4.2% increase is sufficient. You know, like some people would want a 10% increase, etc., and all that. You know, but it is not true that any particular area has had a big decline.
Mm-hmm. So if we look at the 3 billion allocated for the vaccines, once again, is it parked under the 17 billion, or is it a separate fund? Have you got that? If not, we'll just get into that later.
But if I just might add on to that, I mean, if you look at the healthcare sector, it has the fourth highest in terms of development expenditure.
Right.
And that's quite a lot, actually. And if you look at the development expenditure for the healthcare sector or the health sector alone, you saw a 64% rise. So we can see where the government is going with this. I think one is putting a lot of investment into healthcare, trying to combat this COVID-19. And then, of course, you have other factors that, for example, trying to revitalize the economy, and then finally for the people as well.
So when we talk about the Ministry of Health, I think we need to, of course, take into account the areas that are hit hardest by COVID-19. And this, of course, means Sabah. At the moment, we have daily call-outs with Yang Berhormat Datuk Sri Masidi Manjun, who tells us the situation on the ground is under control. But nevertheless, when we look at if this plays out in a similar fashion and the number of cases are increasing as per what we see now, it may not be the case. So do you think this budget allocates enough to provide for infrastructure on the ground to help our frontliners, especially to deal with the pandemic, where we're hit hardest, which is, of course, in Sabah?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is ample in terms of the allocation that is being carved out for healthcare sector. If you look at the operating expenditure, it has increased, as Patrick has pointed out. Development expenditure, that's the fourth highest after transport, education, and defense. If you look at the OE and the DE, that's 32.2 billion. And this is just for the healthcare sector alone. And if I'm not mistaken, that is, we also have the 17 billion for the COVID-19 fund as well. So actually, there is quite a lot being put in for healthcare. I think it is ample at the moment.
I'm actually quite heartened also by the special allocation to for the frontliners. I think we really should reach out and say a big thank you to the frontliners. Who day in day out put themselves up at risk for everyone's benefit. So I think morale must be you know what it is like when you're grinding through such a long process. So I think a little bit helps. Yeah.
And the recovery rate is astounding. I mean, in Malaysia, the rate of recovery for patients who have been infected, we're looking at very high rates of success from our frontliners in dealing with this pandemic. So big thank you to them. And I'm also very happy to see that mental health is mentioned in this budget. Can you allude to that, Imran?
I mean, one thing that we've read a lot of studies due to the lockdowns, the MCOs, CMCOs, when you're confined to a space, your home, for a given number period, it might affect your mental health. And actually, this is one of the risk area where they are afraid of, in the sense that more people will get mental health. And then you saw how cases of domestic violence also came in. So it's very important, and I was glad that actually the government recognized that and put in some allocation to tackle mental health.
So we're lucky we have a government that actually looks at this situation, but it's a very unpredictable situation, and we're not the only ones facing this. I mean, globally, I don't think any country has the absolute silver bullet for this just yet. The balance between taking care of COVID-19, the healthcare pandemic, and also COVID-19, the economic impact. So it's a very fine line to tread between the two. So how does this budget look to stimulate the economy? It's been really hardly hit, and the individuals that have been hit by this economic situation, not only have they lost their jobs, but they're also looking at losing savings down the line, unable to pay back loans. So it's a very large picture to look at. How does this budget look to stimulate the economy once again at a time where case surges are still happening around the country and businesses are definitely adversely affected? Imran, maybe you can start off.
Well, one thing you have to look at how we are tackling the COVID at the moment. We have a CMCO rather than a total lockdown. CMCO are less restrictive, business are allowed to operate. So because we have more experience, so we don't expect any total lockdown like we saw in March and April. Businesses, of course, as I said, are still able to run. The one that is affected mostly relating to retail and hospitality. So we have to recognize that each sectors are affected differently. A more direct impact on how to stimulate the economy comes from the development expenditure. 69 billion, the biggest we have. That's 4.4% of GDP. So construction projects, we know, have a high multiplier effect.
Right.
Then there's also other things like grants for automation, grants for micro enterprises. Automation is very important actually, because during the previous MCO, we saw how factories with high level of automation were able to continue while their competitors had to close down. So I think the package does seems to have the right ingredient to stimulate the economy going forward.
Patrick?
Yeah, if I just add to that, I thought the budget strategy was quite clear, was very well signaled. Budget strategy, I identified 3 prongs to it. One is to make sure the rakyat's prosperity is maintained, the business continuity and economic resilience. And underneath that, there were 14 strategies, right? So if I can sum it up, maybe one way to look at it, when you take a step back from the detail, is to say that the budget's priority was to fight, the COVID fight on the lives, right? So a lot of resourcing to that. Secondly, right, is to cushion the COVID livelihoods, right? Livelihoods affected by COVID. And last but not least, as Imran very nicely put it, was to stimulate the economy with infra projects, with entrepreneurship, and with digitization initiatives.
Some would argue that spending on mega projects is not really something that we should be looking at right now. But how would you answer that? Because a lot of the mega projects have been already planned for, or rather thought out in budget 2020. They just carried on into this budget, including the Pan Borneo Highway, very much needed to help connect, of course, East Malaysia. But there are other mega projects that are currently being questioned as to why we need to go on and continue. Can you explain the multiplier effect that you just mentioned?
Well, just to answer you quickly, for me, we think that this is the right time to have mega projects, because who else is going to stimulate the economy when the difficulties that we're facing at the moment? High multiplier effect is, for example, you have when the projects comes out, construction companies it gets awarded to construction companies, they're awarded to subcontractors, and then they need supplies, they need workers. That's how the multiplier effect works. So it creates a nice value chain for the construction sector, and hopefully it will create more jobs from that as well.
There'll be also an added burden of SOPs, because I do believe that it's not going to be construction as usual. We're going to have to do things differently.
If I can just add a little bit to that, I think, in our publication on the budget that we call Center Stage Budget 2021 Overview, we identified that the World Bank and Global Facility for Disaster Reduction and Recovery reports that the net benefit of infrastructure investment is $4 of benefits for every $1 invested, particularly in the lower and middle income countries. So I think, we also like to say, the best time to invest in infrastructure is when, the cost is likely to be the lowest. So now is the right time to create the platform so that when we bounce back from growth, we bounce back stronger than ever.
So we're not the only country in Southeast Asia doing this. If we look at Indonesia, it's 274 quadrillion. I don't know how many zeros are in there. It's quadrillion. So that's also focused on infrastructure projects, mega projects, and expanding the economy. So I think we're the only 2 countries in Southeast Asia, I stand corrected, that are using this method. Everyone else is kind of shrinking down their budgets. But nevertheless, when we look at tax as a source of revenue, there have been a lot of tax rebates and additional benefits, which are targeting the M40, because the B40 don't fall into the taxable bracket anyway. Can you talk to us about tax, Patrick? I know you're not a tax guy, but
Maybe just before I do that, let me just mention one more point around the
mega projects.
The mega projects,
okay,
right?
Sure.
What I like about the investments on the infrastructure side is that it's in the right sort of infrastructure. When you look at the infrastructure, for example, even the highways, right? It's actually to reduce the gaps between our rural connectivity, in the states that are, where the rural disparities are. When you look at the investments in the public transport, when you look at investment in broadband, right? I think those are all the right sort of investments to be making rather than building more buildings. Now, going back to
just before you answer the tax question, we're going to take a quick break, Patrick, and when we come back, we'll talk about tax and how some incentives have been laid out in the budget to help you, the Malaysian taxpayer. Don't go anywhere. Stay right where you are. We'll be back when we dissect Budget 2021.
Sudahkah anda membudayakan norma baru dalam urusan seharian? Ikuti contoh Adam mengadaptasi norma baru di tempat kerja. Dia menggunakan aplikasi MySejahtera untuk menilai status kesihatannya dan mendaftar masuk ke lokasi. Dia juga merekodkan kehadirannya di portal SpotMe. Urusan kerjanya juga lebih efisien dengan sistem DDMS untuk menyemak tugasan dan aplikasi MyGov.UC untuk berkomunikasi dengan lebih lancar. Pendigitalan ialah norma baru. Kita guna, kita sokong, kita mampu. Ekonomi pasca COVID-19 ternyata mencabar, namun telah membuka peluang pekerjaan baru, terutamanya dalam ekonomi digital. Ramai yang terinspirasi untuk meningkatkan kualiti hidup. Mereka yang ingin menjadi usahawan seperti Khairul kini boleh mendaftarkan perniagaan dengan mudah di portal Malaysia Biz. Dalam mengadaptasi norma baru ini juga, anaknya sedang giat mengikuti pembelajaran dalam talian. Pendigitalan ialah norma baru. Kita guna, kita sokong, kita mampu.
In response to the budget that was announced, scrutinizing into the detail of the three goals, the strategies, the measurement that was outlined, I found the budget is very comprehensive and thorough, given the conditions that we are in. There is the need to find the balance between further economic development, economic recovery, and the challenge that we're facing under pandemic COVID-19. In doing so, it is very important for us to note that the first time inclusion of SDG into the budgetary allocation is very significant, because SDG can serve as a monitoring platform for development, and indirectly it serves as monitoring performance as well for the budgetary allocations. 20 million is being allocated to my SDG Trust Fund, and further 5 million is allocated for FPPGM SDG, can serve as a good platforms to mainstream SDG into our development plan. And at the same time, through the projects to be carried out, it can serve as a showcase as to how plan that is made at national level can achieve its target at the lowest recipient level. What will make a difference this time around in terms of budget in comparison to previous one is that how it is efficiently and effectively delivered. We can't expect a different result if we don't improve on the delivery mechanisms, including the culture of delivery and also all relevant aspects to it.
Welcome back, and you just heard Dr. Zainal Abidin Sanusi commenting on the SDG allocations under the budget. So personally, my biggest criticism of the SDG goals is that the biggest economy in the world was not completely on board back then. But hey, hey, ho, ho, we have Mr. Joe. He's now the new president, so come on, man, Uncle Sam, get with the program. Let's continue talking about the budget 2021. Patrick, when we left off, we were about to touch on tax. So let's get into that. It's 1 percentage point for individuals with taxable income in the bracket of 50,000 to 70,000. So that's for the M40, which are going to land within this bracket. Maybe some of the T20 who now, I don't know what they call it, graduated, demoted into this bracket. Can you please elaborate what that means?
Yeah, so some people were joking, right, and saying, what's 200, right? But if I put 200 in front of you and I say that, would you take it, right? I think, it's helpful, right? It's still, I'll keep it in my pocket and not let it out of sight. Yeah, so I think every bit helps in these times. So 200, is a nice gesture, so to speak, to the M40. But it's not only the only thing available, right? So I think what the officers have crafted very nicely in the budget is there's increased medical and care relief of up to 8,000. There's increased and expanded lifestyle relief up to 3,000. There's extending the scheme Simpanan Pendidikan National Relief to 8,000 and 3,000 for the PRS, Private Retirement Scheme Relief. So there's also study relief, 7,000. And particularly for those that have been, say, given, VSS schemes and all, I think the increased exemption, right, to 20,000 for each full year of service is probably very welcome. Yeah.
That's some of the tax reliefs, which are not just, of course, focused on income tax, but also other areas as well. Can you speak to the broad-ranging effects of tax relief given in this budget for the M40?
Well, it's the idea here is to help alleviate some of the burdens that M40 are facing due to the COVID-19. This will help. I mean, every little bit helps. And if you look how the minister gave examples of all the reliefs that you will be getting, I think it's more of that idea. You have give a little bit here, give a little bit there. So the impact will be on more money on your pocket, and you would spend most likely, and that would generates the economy, so the economy can turn around.
Also, there's like a targeted area in which you should spend, like lifestyle and fitness and stuff like that. So they are actually encouraging you to go out and spend on these things, which actually are to your benefit in the long run.
When the MCO lifts.
When the MCO
I've already asked two of my teams, like captains, can I get a receipt for my match fees?
All right, we're going to have to dissect that one separately, Patrick. When we look at syntax, however, we've always increased the syntax moving forward, and we've seen cigarette prices go up, but because of the high syntax, and of course, gaming kind of distilled down to, I think, 9 companies which are legally allowed to conduct gaming. So now we have added a measure to curb vaping. It seems that syntax is increasing, but at the same time, the shadow economy is also kind of increasing. We've got illicit cigarettes, we've got illegal gaming, and soon we might have illegal vaping, which I don't think we've heard of yet, but we might. The lack of enforcement has been said is, of course, one of the reasons why the shadow economy exists. What are the other measures that we can take to actually kind of address this? Because there's a lot of lost income to the shadow economy. Patrick, Imran, any one of you?
Yeah, I'm more than happy to start first. So I think, one thing I would say is that, if you were in the shadow economy, you should be afraid and be very afraid, because I think the government is going to put a big focus on this. This is just my gut feel.
Okay.
Right? Because when I look in the details of the documents, right, there's a special box that talks about how the shadow economy is still around 20%, 19.2, I think, to be precise, right? And to talk about the kind of steps around using more digital and more enforcement, I think the multi-agency task force is a big leap forward. Yeah. So I think, And I think that may also explain part of the reasons why they think that they can get increased tax revenues, because I think there will be hopefully there will be a big focus towards the people that should be paying tax but are not paying it now, right? While the rest of us that are diligently paying our taxes. So having said this, I'm probably going to expect a tax audit.
Imran.
Well, I mean, when you talk about sin tax, I mean, no one can really argue for it, right? It's just that the government have to beef up on the enforcement, as you said. And you're rightly put, it's revenue loss. And I'm sure if you're the government, you would want to have a stake onto this revenue. And I think it's a good idea that they tax vaping as well. I mean, the government have to have a stand on this.
Right.
If you legalize it, you regulate it, then you tax it, and that's more revenue for the government.
Yeah, we're looking at about, if 19.2% is what they believe it's almost 300 billion of the economy, right? Yeah. So 15% tax, average tax on that 300 billion, it gives us an extra 45 billion, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
And I suppose it augurs well for the legal businesses also, the ones that are already currently doing business in these areas. I'm sure they'd be more than welcome to see more enforcement because they're paying those high taxes on their product. When we also look at the tourism sector, international tourism, I think for the foreseeable future, it's not going to be in existence. Aviation industry, the hotels, all those industries that are kind of reliant on international tourism are perhaps going to take a huge hit. So is there anything in the budget that can help rejuvenate these ailing businesses, especially in these sectors hardest hit by COVID-19? Imran, try to start with this.
Well, in first class, it doesn't look like it. Because, as you can see, this tourism is very much dependent on opening of our borders, and we have yet to do that. But I think if you look at previous stimuluses that the government have implemented this year, do give some sort of support for the tourism sector. And I think a lot of the support is also, some of it is being carried forward for next year. I think there should be more promotion of domestic tourism, for example. Sure. I mean, yeah, people say how many times people can travel, but when you saw the CMCO lifted or when we had the PKPP, weekends are full.
Right.
A lot of hotels, weekends are full. People were traveling. So instead of just relying on international tourism, maybe we should have more promotion on domestic tourism. And then, of course, there are incentives, for example, for businesses to pivot, change from tourism, for example, to other areas. The agricultural, for example, micro entrepreneurs. There's the online trading, things like that. Maybe it's also a way for some business to pivot as well.
If I can chime in a little bit, I think it's quite clear from the response of the hotel owners. They were not happy, etc. Right, etc. I mean, when you look in the budget, there are initiatives, to actually help the sector. In particular, helping the retrenched workers, the unemployed. Some wage subsidies. There's also the tour guides, orang aslis in the Taman Negara, etc. And all that. But I think. Besides those that are specifically targeted in it, the general digitization, the SME grants, etc., and all that, it should also be available to them to tap into, right? So maybe that's what you mean by, and you've seen one or two examples of, for example, like Mandarin Oriental saying that like within 10-kilometer radius you can get a 1-hour housekeeping service with 2 housekeeping. So they've been trying to pivot some of their business models, right? But the biggest disappointment to me, if I can, right, is that it's not entirely true that international tourism, will be lost for the foreseeable future. If you take the example, right, that Imran just mentioned, when we before CMCO, right, most of our resort hotels were full. Okay, and we were very lucky as Malaysians because we got many islands and many beaches to go to. Right, Singaporeans can only go to Sentosa Island. Right, so you can imagine that if we actually agreed some procedures with Singapore to actually open up the border, and the risk is fairly low. Right, I can imagine there will be a lot of people flying up or driving through, right, into Malaysia, etc. and all that. And Singapore is also looking at opening the borders to a few different countries, etc., with SOPs in place. I think I saw some stats earlier, like that there's something like a 1 in 27 million chance that you'll contract COVID when you're on an airline. Right. I think Singapore is instituting a policy where the first day the visitor comes in, right, the moment you land, you get a test, you're in a hotel, you're not allowed out in the first day. When you get your negative test result, then you're allowed out.
Oh, that's fairly quickly.
Yeah, that's fairly quick. Right?
And I can't imagine how Singaporeans feel. I mean, they're already kind of locked in. And if you were locked in permanently for a period of time, never mind. Comment down below. We're going to take another short break. And when we come back, we'll be focusing on the B40 community and also optimism. Plus, we'll talk about the KWSP withdrawals or EPF withdrawals that you can make if you have lost your job. We'll be back as we dissect Budget 2021, prioritizing the needs of the rakyat.
Majikan tidak mengambil tindakan terhadap pekerja yang tidak datang kerja kerana ini adalah arahan yang dikeluarkan oleh kerajaan, bukan pilihan pekerja-pekerja tersebut. Semua aktiviti sukan, rekreasi, sosial dan budaya juga tidak dibenarkan.
Untuk terus menggalakkan digitalisasi dalam sistem penyampaian perkhidmatan kerajaan ke arah revolusi industri 4.0, kerajaan akan menyediakan lebih banyak perkhidmatan secara dalam talian ataupun e-counter. Ini termasuklah melaksanakan proses mematikan stem, menyemak dan menuntut wang tidak dituntut bermula 1 Oktober 2020 dan sesi e-temuduga bagi permohonan beasiswa kerajaan. Permohonan yang perlu dibuat untuk mendapatkan bantuan BPN 2.0 ini, kerajaan akan menyalurkan bantuan secara terus kepada 10.6 juta penerima yang telah diluluskan di bawah BPN sebelum ini. Dan bagi mereka yang layak tetapi tidak pernah menerima BPN, kerajaan akan memberikan peluang untuk rayuan dan permohonan bank.
Membuat swab test pada pekerja-pekerja ini, dan bagi mereka yang mencarum perkeso, semua kos untuk swab test ditanggung oleh perkeso. Jadi ditanggung oleh perkeso. Jadi secara percuma lah akan dibuat swab test. Ini memastikan mereka yang bekerja itu sudah pun negatif COVID, dan yang positif tentu saja akan dibawa ke hospital untuk rawatan.
This is the proof that the government appreciate the service of the civil servant, especially for those for civil servant who is serving the country in a difficult situation where they work beyond expectation to help the economy of Malaysia.
The government also trying to ease up the impact of the COVID-19 by creating job creation initiative where 100 million is allocated for NGO involved in job creation, and then also 2 billion was allocated to continue green technology financing scheme.
So a lot of individuals are concerned with job creation because they have lost their jobs or are negatively impacted by the situation today, where we've even seen pilots that we have interviewed on separate programs here at RTM who tell us about how they're being furloughed, I believe is the term used in the States. But over here, it would seem that a 90% pay cut has been introduced to them, kept them on the employment bracket, but nevertheless slashed their pay. So it doesn't seem like everyone is happy with that situation. New jobs are being sought, and cross-skilling, reskilling, upskilling, all those words are being thrown around. But we're looking at how the budget helps towards getting individuals back to work. So for the individuals, it's of course been a very challenging time. How is the budget putting people back to work in different industries maybe, but putting them back to work nevertheless? Patrick?
I think there have been some various schemes have been announced as part of the initiative, right? So one is the 700 million allocation for MyStep, or the short-term employment program, right? 50,000 job opportunities on a contract basis in the public sector and GLC link, starting January 2021. There were also the 2 billion allocated to enhancing the Penjana Kerjaya, right? 4,000 incentive for maximum 4,000 for employees earning 1,500 below. Yeah. So, and then there is also the scheme Jaminan Penjana Pekerjaan, Jana Kerja, right? To provide 500,000 new opportunities, including skills development and retraining.
These are existing programs or newly introduced under the budget? Because I do believe they kind of sound alike the ones that are already being pushed by HRDF.
Yeah, maybe extended and additional allocations.
So those are how people are being put back to work. But for those that are negatively impacted, they've already lost their jobs, there is a safety net being introduced. This is in addition to the I Lestari, which is already in effect right now. So a lot of people are asking if you can withdraw your EPF next year, what's going to happen this year, seeing as how you've been retrenched. The I Lestari is still in effect until March, if I'm not mistaken. So can you help explain the EPF withdrawal scheme that's been introduced under the budget, Imran?
Well, it's basically what people have been asking is to withdraw account one, which is normally that's untouchable, right? You can only invest those money, but you cannot touch it. But I guess in some instances, there would be savers that have withdrawn completely their account too. So they need to reach out in some of those savings. So we think that it was a good move that the government allowed this and allowed it more in a more targeted manner, rather than just give you one lump sum, 5,000, 6,000, 10,000 to withdraw, to have it spread out for 12 months, up to 500 per month. So, I mean, we have to also see EPF, your EPF saving as your future needs as well. So we have to balance between current needs and future needs as well. So I think this is a good compromise here by the government.
Especially when they designed it so that they restricted it to people who have lost their jobs.
Correct. Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So they then restricted it to about a maximum of about 600,000 people they're expecting. Right? Because to allow people like him and me to actually touch the money, it would have been the wrong move entirely.
You already have 200 ringgit in your pocket, Patrick.
I took the A Lestari. That's a little bit more helps.
So when we look at this, there were a lot of concerns raised because of the future and how a lot of people have very little savings to begin with. When you start withdrawing from account one, which is the investment portion of your EPF savings, what are the forbearing results in the future for these individuals? They've already lost their job. They're struggling for the year, and then they've got no retirement or very little retirement to look forward to.
I mean, you have to look at, as I said, the current needs is you need to survive the current needs.
Otherwise, there's no retirement.
Yeah, exactly. Otherwise, there's no retirement. But then for the future, I mean, if you look at if government managed to stimulate the economy via the various measures, for example, the development expenditure and the like, hopefully these people will go back to the employment by next year, next 2 years, so they can build up the savings again. So the idea here is to stave off current needs or for current needs, and hopefully that the economy will pick up so they can get employment to start saving again.
And it's a good thing we have the EPF because I think some countries do not have this safety net or savings measure. But it doesn't have to be for the year. If they are employed for, within 3 months, they can opt to stop taking out that 500 ringgit.
Well, one other measure that was introduced was the dropping of the employee contribution from 11 to 9%. No, that gives increased flexibility. In the past, when they've done that, I've availed myself of it. I don't think I will this time around because, like Imran said, you got to balance between retirement and But however, if I lost my job, then that would have come in quite handy. Right? So if I thought that I had if I was in a risky industry, and hopefully I'm not to my employers. Right? But if I thought I was, then I'll probably reduce the contribution so I can build up a little bit of a savings.
When we look at the moratoriums also, there has been a sigh of relief because the program is continued for those that cannot afford to pay their monthly repayments. But optimistically, the finance minister did say that about 80% are already repaying their loans. If we look at how the uncertainties of the times are a reality, that could change because businesses might actually go out of business or people might still lose their jobs down the line. So how does the moratorium then come into effect? Is it going to be an ongoing process? Can you apply for it as and when you lose your job? Is this going to be sort of like a new norm for the banks?
I think it's not a new norm, so to say.
And it shouldn't be, right?
Yeah, it shouldn't be. I mean, people should pay their debt. Of course. That's my personal point of view. But from what I understand is that there's no deadline in terms of asking for the moratorium. This latest targeted assistance. So let's say you lose your job 2-3 months down the line. I understand they're making it quite easy for people to apply for the moratorium. And I think if you speak to the banks, the process is not that hard as well. And I think the approval rate is quite high and they're doing it quite fast as well. I mean, credit to the banks as well for making the application, the process quite easy and fast as well.
And to the point, it shouldn't be the norm because if it's a norm, right, eventually it affects the bank and the banking system, right? And we can't have that, right? So we need to protect that as well, right? So, but luckily, as per the analysis in the economic and financial fiscal outlooks, the TIC reports, right, the banking system seems to still be well capitalized, etc. But if this keeps going on, then I think there will be an issue, maybe down the line, but I don't think we'll get there.
So we're going to take our final break. When we come back, I'll get the final thoughts from both our guests in the studio on Budget 2021 and how we're going to be moving forward to embrace the challenges of the year ahead. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
So I pronounced some of the
Saya nak menzahirkan rasa terima kasih kepada anda semua sebagai rakyat Malaysia. Anda adalah manusia yang hebat. Kita ibarat sebuah keluarga yang besar. Kita saling bantu-membantu ketika zaman susah. Inilah nilai sebenar persaudaraan rakyat Malaysia tanpa mengira bangsa.
Kerajaan telah membuat keputusan mulai 1 Ogos pemakaian pelitup muka di dalam pengangkutan awam dan tempat-tempat awam yang bersesak-sesak adalah diwajibkan. Mereka yang didapati ingkar peraturan tersebut akan dikenakan tindakan tegas seperti kompaun dan dihadapkan ke mahkamah. Orang ramai boleh menggunakan menggunakan pelitup muka yang dijahit sendiri mengikut spesifikasi yang dikeluarkan oleh Pertubuhan Kesihatan Sedunia WHO. Kementerian Kesihatan menyatakan bahawa dua perkara yang mampu untuk mengurangkan jangkitan adalah memakai pelitup muka atau melakukan penjarakan sosial. Kita masih belum menang. Terus patuhi SOP yang ditetapkan bagi memutuskan rantaian jangkitan COVID-19.
Majikan tidak mengambil tindakan terhadap pekerja yang tidak datang kerja kerana ini adalah arahan yang dikeluarkan oleh kerajaan, bukan pilihan pekerja-pekerja tersebut. Semua aktiviti sukan, rekreasi, sosial dan budaya juga tidak dibenarkan.
As a student, I am deeply appreciate the initiative that the government provide for us, such as maintaining the e-belia programs through the e-wallet apps and also the laptop loan scheme for the PTPTN recipient.
E-wallet, RM50 inside e-wallet, it helps me for my transportation to work, especially. So I want to thank you. I want to say thank you to Kerajaan for helping in giving us the BPN for minimizing our burden.
Actually, it's helped us a lot during this pandemic COVID-19. Like government give us so many initiatives, like toward the entrepreneur, toward the employer. There's so many industries that they help us. Actually, if we could say, there's so many more than million actually help us. But I really hope that our government will continuously help these what we call the young entrepreneur especially, to boost more economy and more scale and more sale in the future for 2021 economy, inshallah.
All right, we've got our final thoughts on Budget 2021, but let's start with some thoughts on the B40 community and people who are largely beneficiaries for the BPN and a lot of targeted assistance given to this community. The concern has been that individuals who are earning daily wage are not registered under the system. Also, they are being employed by individuals who don't subscribe to any form of EPF or SOCSO. So it's largely kind of cash-based industry. Imran, how do we kind of get these individuals registered, get them into the system, bring them into the fold, and educate them that this is the way forward? You can't do business the way you've always been doing it.
I think it's just more education. I think we need more and more education, continuous education as well, going down to the ground. Although you can't physically meet them,
right.
But at least have some, through slots, through TVs and the like, to get them to actually register. And you have to highlight also what's the benefits of registering.
Right.
There's a lot of benefit in registering grants, loans for micro entrepreneurs like these people. So actually, it's good if they do register.
Yeah, the budget's made provision for that, right? The 1.2 billion of microcredit financing through Tekun, PUNB, Agrobank, BSN. To encourage entrepreneurship, as well as the Lestari Bumi Financing Facility Scheme, right, Bas? There's another 300 million there. So I think there are benefits to getting on board.
So hopefully more people will come into the fold. When we look at the resilience of the economy moving forward, building that capacity that the government is optimistic about, we look at foreign investment and how do we bring that back into the country. We have incentives laid out under this budget to attract foreign investments back into the country. Patrick.
Yes, I think it's worth a mention. I think we all know that there's a global supply chain disruption, right? So companies will be looking to move, and to reduce their risk to that. So I think the budget announced tax incentives for relocating, expanding it to include companies in selected services sector, including companies adapting industry 4IR, digitization technologies. So I think this is quite good. The new companies will be given 0 to 10% income tax rate for a period after 10 years. Existing companies with new services segment will be given 10% tax rates. So the applications have been extended to another year to end 31st December. So hopefully these things would actually get more people getting in. The introduction of Global Trading Center incentive as well, and the relaxation and extension of the Principal Hub initiative, those will also help us, bring more regional business into Malaysia.
All right, Imran, speak to us about building capacity, because we've learned that we cannot rely on like a global supply chain. We have to be resilient to a certain extent within the country and build our own capacity and sustainability. Can you speak to us about lessons learned through COVID-19?
I think one of the there's a few good lessons learned. First is, as you said, the supply chain. We have to have some sort of domestic capabilities, at least that we can ramp up if we were to face another pandemic like this one. Secondly, automation, digitization. I think that is very important. And when we had the lockdown, I mentioned this earlier, how some companies were able to thrive and able to maintain their utilization rate close to 100, not 100%, but maybe 70%, 80%, whilst their competitors 20%, 30%. Right. So I think those are the lessons learned for this COVID-19 pandemic.
What are your final thoughts on Budget 2021 as we move forward into the new year? We have about a month to go before we enter 2021. What are your hopes that in Parliament they won't face too much headway going into approving this budget and having it rolled out to the people? Patrick.
Yeah, so I'm not sure if this is going to make me popular or not, but I'm usually quite a hard marker. So, I was toying with the fact, should I give this budget a grading, or not, and I think I'll be brave.
You're going to go there?
Yeah, okay. I'll go there, right?
We're going to
go. Although the Minister of Finance probably tell me off on a Monday when we have a chat. But I would grade it a good, strong B+.
Okay.
Right, the only reason why I say B+ and not an A for his maiden budget, for his first budget, is because while there have been moves in the sustainability area, right, because this is the first budget of the RMK 12 period, right? I think we could have made more of an investment into the sustainability area, sustainability infrastructure areas, etc. and all that. But look, that's me speaking as an economist, as a technocrat, right? He's crafting a budget, right, that has to take into account the political realities.
Right.
So because of that, a strong B+.
Would you like to jump in there and grade away?
Well, I'll give him an A then.
Okay.
I'm actually quite satisfied with this budget. I think it's a good budget, very comprehensive. It's well balanced. It tackles our current needs, fighting COVID-19. All this to healthcare we talked about earlier. It provides safety net and support to the rakyat, especially the B40s. And there is enough measures to stimulate the economy going forward. But there's also areas where, for example, investing for the futures to make our economy resilient, automation, digitization. So I think overall is a good balanced budget, well comprehensive.
I think there might be some political concerns with the budget, but that will be addressed on a different show. We're focused on how this budget helps the people. So that's why the high grades are being rolled out here. As we look at the budget, I think every level of society does benefit from this budget. We'd just like to quickly ask how accessible all the programs laid out in the budget will be, and how will the rollout be? Because we saw how Prihatin and Penjana were rolled out. That's about 55 billion already. So this is an addition to that. Yeah. What kind of rollout strategies do you think the government should employ to make sure everyone that should be benefiting is benefiting from the budget? Imran.
I think Laksana that was created, I think that was a good concept or a good move by the government, because it monitors the rollout of the projects and trying to make it faster. Of course, implementation, that we're going to get hiccups along the way. But the only way is I think is to make sure that those people are not those people that are targeted do get the help that they need. And there's also a channel for them to, for example, cry out for help, or go back to the government saying that we're not getting any help here. So there's more of a two-way communication between the government and the people that needs the help.
Patrick, your final thoughts about rollout of Budget 2021?
Yeah. I think in the world of being online now and digitization, etc., and all that, there's really no excuses, right? So I think the role of the voluntary society, NGOs, the role of the MPs, etc., and all that, I think it's very important to bring it down to the grassroots. Just to give you an example, when I spotted a few of these things here, etc., and I know that give a shout out to Roshan. He's probably under a bit of stress, right? So I just told him, look, there are these initiatives in here, etc., and all that. That you can look into, etc. So I think if that goes up and down the country, right, people pouring over these things and saying that there are these things that you can avail yourself to, etc. and all that, I think that would actually help get a lot more. And I know our lawmakers are actually very activist on that front, and so that's full credit to them. I follow a few of them across the house, right, on social media, etc. and all that, and they've been pouring through and they've been analysing, and I think that would help increase the implementation.
Right, so dissemination of that information and channels available to all sectors of the industry or the Malaysian plethora, really. So I think our lawmakers also have their work cut out for them. I mean, this is an unprecedented situation. I think coming together, being united, and helping also get the message across of just how important this budget can be for the resilience of the country moving forward. I think that would be something that we're looking forward to as Malaysians, to see how we can all come together. I mean, Mr. Biden across the sea is actually doing the same thing. He's kind of rallying everybody together. 70 million people voted for the other guy, so he's trying to get them back on the same page. So I think we need a little bit of that here as well to bring everyone together. Patrick, maybe one final sentence on how this budget you think will benefit Malaysia.
Yeah, I think this budget gives us a bit of hope. Gives us a bit of support, to actually pull us through these difficult times. So I think, for that, I thank you very much, and I hope I do hope that, the House, will listen to the tita of the Agong, and, we will, try to get this passed.
And a final mention from you, Imran.
Well, I'll just say it provides good support, gives us hope. I do agree with that, and hopefully that will get passed in the Parliament.
We're looking forward to that as well, and we want to thank you all for joining us as we have been speaking about the budget 2021. We are truly looking forward to dissecting more about the budget, so stay tuned to RTM. We will bring you all the updates on how this goes come Monday. So please do join us for all our programs discussing the budget at various time slots, and you can of course watch us on MyClicks as well. I'm Terence Das. Stand united, we shall prevail. Budget 2021. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, everyone.